Guys, welcome to the Ionic framework tutorials for beginners. Okay, so first of all, we'll see what is Ionic framework. Ionic framework is an open source mobile UI toolkit to build high quality cross platform native and the web applications. So, with the help of this Ionic framework, we can build the native Android and iOS applications as well as the web applications. Okay, and the main advantage of this Ionic framework is using the single code base. You can write a code one time and that single code can be used in the Android, iOS as well as the web applications. Okay, so whatever the code which you are writing, that code can be run in the Android device, it can be run in the iOS device as well as the as a web application. Okay, so next thing is overview for the Ionic framework. So overview means basically why we have to use the Ionic framework. When it comes to the overview, the first one is one code base run everywhere. So this Ionic framework is the only mobile stack that enables web developers to build applications. Okay, it has a single code base that can work on the different platforms. Okay, so next one is focus on performance. Ionic framework is built to perform and behave great on the latest mobile devices. So basically it is focused upon the performance. So previously the hybrid applications which are developed by using the some frameworks, they have very less performance in the devices, but with the help of this Ionic framework we have built-in performance as well as some custom components are there. With the help of these custom components and all, we can it can increase the performance of the device. The next one is clean, simple and functional design. So Ionic framework already has the components, topography and the base theme that adapts to each platform. So whenever you are trying to design some page, that page by using some Ionic components and all, so what happens is like that page is compatible with the Android and iOS because it is using something called as responsive web designing in the backend. It is using something called as responsive web designing in the backend. And next one is native and web optimized. The Ionic framework, it uses a capacitor or Cordova to deploy natively. Okay, so it has something called as it has a so whenever you're creating a project, that project can be created by using the capacitor or the Cordova. With the help of this capacitor and Cordova, you can deploy the applications natively, that is in the Android and iOS platforms, or you can run in the browser as a progressive web app, or you can run in the browser as a progressive web apps. Okay, so next thing we will see something like framework compatibility. So this Ionic framework is already supported in most of the JavaScript frameworks. In that, Angular is one. Okay, the latest version of Ionic is re-engineered to work as a standalone web component library. Means, so here, whatever the Ionic framework is there, this Ionic framework can be used as front end. So for designing the UI and UX, basically for designing the UI for the different frameworks like React, Stencil and Vue. Okay, so this Ionic framework is compatible with the JavaScript, Angular, React, Stencil and Vue.js. Okay, so next we will see how to install the Ionic framework. So whenever you want to install the Ionic framework, you need Node.js. Okay, we need Node.js. So when you want to download the Node.js, directly you can go to this website here, nodejs.org, and from here you can download the Node.js and you can install in your system. Okay, so after installing this Node.js, next thing what you have to do is, so the Ionic framework can be installed by using command line only. With the help of some commands only, you can install the Ionic framework. So you can go to the Ionic framework docs where you can file like installing Ionic framework CLI. So here you can see there are some set of commands. With the help of this command, you can install the Ionic framework in your system, and when you want to uninstall, you can use this command to uninstall the Ionic framework. Okay, so here when you want to install the Ionic framework, first of all you have to download the Node.js and you have to install in your system. So let us think if you are using a Mac machine. If you are using a Mac machine, you can directly open the terminal and you can install the Ionic framework. Or if you are using some Windows machine, in that case you have to open the Node.js command prompt. In that Node.js command prompt, you can install the Ionic framework globally. Okay, so with the help of this command, basically you can install the Ionic framework. Okay, so as we are going to use the Ionic framework with AngularJS in this tutorials and all, so we need the latest version of the AngularJS in your system. Okay, so with the help of the next command, that is npm install @ionic/angular. So the last command which is there in this one, we have to install the latest AngularJS. So when you install the latest AngularJS, then only we can develop some application with the Ionic framework and the AngularJS combination. Okay, so that is about the installation of Node.js. And next thing is we need Microsoft Visual Code. We need this Microsoft Visual Code because whenever you want to write some code, after creating some project in the Ionic framework, we need to write some code. So whenever you want to write some code, you need this Microsoft Visual Code. Okay. So next thing is we'll see how to create a project. How to create a project in the Ionic framework. So whenever you want to create a project in the Ionic framework, so already Ionic has some predefined starter templates. Ionic framework has some predefined starter templates like blank side menu and tabs. Okay, so whenever you want to create a Ionic project with the help, something like if you want to use the capacitor as a backend, you can use Ionic start, application name, blank. As we are going to use AngularJS, you have to mention the type as Angular here, and then you have to use capacitor. So when you do like this, it will be creating your project with the help of the capacitor. So if you don't want to create the project with the capacitor, and if you want to use a Cordova, so in that case, what you can do is you can use the same command. You can use the same command, but without minus capacitor. Okay, so in this way, you can create some Ionic project. So already it is mentioned here. So whenever you want to create a project, you can see here there is some blank project which doesn't have anything. It will display some header and the footer directly, and then you have some tabs application. It will be displaying some tabs here. That is a tabs template. And next one is you have side menu. So by default, the side menu will be displayed inside the starter template. Okay, so in this way you can do it. And next thing is so when you want to run your application in the Android and iOS, so when you want to run your application in the Android and iOS, so next thing is we need to set up the Android Studio as well as the iOS Xcode. So we need to set up the Xcode. So whenever you want to develop the application for the Android from the Ionic framework docs, you can go to the developing for Android, and here already they have given you some setup rules and all, something like how to install the Android Studio and how to give some path and all, how to do some settings and all. Already they have mentioned here. You can follow this in order to use the Android Studio. That is when you want to develop an Android application. The same thing is when you want to develop an iOS application. So already they have mentioned like how to use the Xcode setup and all. You can use this Xcode setup and you can install the Xcode into your Mac machine and you can develop the application for your iOS. Okay, so in this way you can do some setup for your Android Studio as well as the Xcode. Okay, and the next thing is here. The main advantage of the Ionic framework is you can see here there is some UI component called as Ionic alert. So by default, whatever the UI is there here, the UI will be loaded inside the application based upon the platform. So if you are using an Android device, so whatever the Ionic components are there, the Ionic components will be loaded like the same like your iOS UI. if you're using an Android device, the same, without any changes, the same components will be using the Android UI style and all. So you can see here, by default you can see some alert here. When I click on show alert, it is displaying the alert in the form of an, basically it is displaying the alert like an iOS user interface. So if the same code, what is the same thing is there, the same Ionic alert, now I'll change it to Android. So when I change it to Android, now see here, the buttons have been changed to Android UI. When I click on this button also, basically the alert will be displayed in the same like your Android user interface. So that is the main advantage of your Ionic framework. So whatever the UI components are there, the UI components are compatible, or basically the UI components will be displayed based upon the different platform. So if it is an Android device, by default it will load the Android user interface. If it is an Android device, it will by default will load the Android user interface. So in this way, the UI will be loaded in the different platforms and all. Okay. So that is first of all we are creating an application. Then we have seen something like how to use the templates and all here. And next thing is, so in the next tutorial we'll see something like how to create the Ionic project and what is the structure of the project, or what is the structure of the project, or what is the overview of the project. Okay, so thank you guys.